In 19th-century Russia, Dostoevsky was not only a novelist but also a philosopher, psychologist, and spiritual visionary. He explored the unconscious before Freud, expressed existentialist truths before existentialism, and foresaw the rise of totalitarian regimes. His works go beyond literature, addressing profound questions about suffering, freedom, good and evil, God's existence, and the search for meaning in life. Dostoevsky endured immense personal suffering, facing a mock execution, years in Siberian exile, epilepsy, gambling addiction, poverty, and the loss of children. These experiences gave his philosophy a rare authenticity. At the same time, he was deeply learned, engaging with philosophy, theology, psychology, and political thought. He warned against the destructive potential of materialism, atheism, socialism, and scientific rationalism. His philosophy is not a dry system but a living, dramatic exploration of the human soul, revealed through unforgettable characters and stories. It is a philosophy born of suffering, sharpened by genius, and offered as a gift to those willing to confront humanity's deepest truths. Part 1: The Sacred Foundation of Human Freedom. For Dostoevsky, freedom is not political or social, but the metaphysical basis of human existence. It is both a precious gift and a terrible burden, because humans are free to choose not only good but also evil, not only happiness but also self-destruction. Most people fear true freedom and escape it through submission to authority, rigid ideologies, or shallow distractions. This creates the central human tragedy: we long for freedom yet try to avoid the responsibility it demands. Dostoevsky illustrates this through the underground man, who chooses misery over happiness just to affirm his autonomy. Human freedom is paradoxical: we willingly suffer or act irrationally simply to prove we are not machines. Any political, religious, or psychological system that denies this irreducible freedom is bound to fail. Yet Dostoevsky also shows that freedom can serve love, forgiveness, and hope, as embodied by characters like Alyosha Karamazov and Prince Myshkin. True freedom comes not from the absence of external constraints but from inner spiritual strength. It means choosing love even when it is rejected, forgiveness even when undeserved, and hope even when impossible. The path to this higher freedom leads through suffering, which strips illusions, teaches compassion, and opens the soul to redemption. Without suffering, humanity would remain spiritually immature and incapable of authentic love. Part 2: The Underground Mind and Modern Consciousness. In 1864, Dostoevsky created the underground man, a prophetic figure of modern alienation. He is the first fully self-aware neurotic in literature, cursed by excessive intellect, paralyzed by overanalysis, and unable to feel or connect authentically. He suffers from analysis paralysis, distorted emotions, social anxiety, and deep internal contradictions, ultimately transforming his suffering into a mark of superiority. Dostoevsky shows that this is not merely a psychological or social issue but a spiritual crisis. Modern man has lost faith, love, and transcendence. The solution is not more analysis or therapy but a reorientation of the soul, learning to live, love, and surrender to something greater than the ego through grace and redemption. Part 3: The War Against Rationalism and Scientific Materialism. Dostoevsky viewed his era, the 19th century, dominated by science, rationalism, and utopian social schemes, as a path toward spiritual catastrophe. He criticized rationalism for misunderstanding human nature. People are not purely logical beings but emotional, spiritual, and often irrational. Self-destructive behavior often arises from deep psychological needs rather than ignorance or poor conditions. In his novels, such as Crime and Punishment and The Brothers Karamazov, characters choose suffering, violence, or rebellion not out of rational calculation but as expressions of freedom, despair, or spiritual struggle, showing reason's limits in explaining human behavior. He warned that rationalism and scientific materialism would lead to nihilism, the loss of meaning, dignity, and morality, ultimately paving the way for totalitarianism. If humans are seen as mere machines, then free will, moral choice, and responsibility collapse, making exploitation and oppression justifiable. For Dostoevsky, human flourishing requires not the rejection of reason but its balance with faith, emotion, and spiritual intuition. Reason alone grows cold and destructive, while faith without reason becomes fanatic. Suffering plays a vital role. It humbles human pride, reveals truths beyond rational grasp, and opens the soul to grace, compassion, and transformation. Only through this integration can people find true meaning, beauty, and transcendence that reason alone cannot provide. Part 4: The Psychology of Evil and Human Darkness. Dostoevsky argued that evil does not primarily arise from poverty, ignorance, or social conditions, but from the human heart itself. His experiences in a Siberian prison convinced him that many criminals acted not out of necessity but out of choice, sometimes for power, rebellion, or the thrill of violence. This led him to conclude that every person carries within them the potential for both good and evil, and that moral choices shape one's destiny. Through Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment, Dostoevsky illustrated how intellectual reasoning can be twisted into self-deception that justifies crime. He also emphasized that evil often grows gradually through small moral compromises, as seen in Smerdyakov in The Brothers Karamazov. For Dostoevsky, evil is inseparable from human freedom. If people are free, some will inevitably choose evil. Attempts to eradicate evil through social or political reform, he warned, often lead to greater oppression and violence, as depicted in Demons. The only true response lies in personal spiritual and moral transformation. Each individual must confront the evil within, struggle against it, and through repentance, find the possibility of redemption. Part 5: The Problem of Innocent Suffering and Ivan's Rebellion. No philosophical problem troubled Dostoevsky more than innocent suffering. He asked, how can a loving, all-powerful God allow children to be tortured and killed? While theologians explain this with free will, greater purposes, or divine mystery, Dostoevsky, through Ivan Karamazov in The Brothers Karamazov, rejects such answers. Ivan gathers real accounts of children's brutal suffering and concludes that no higher good can justify it. He does not deny God's existence but refuses to accept a world built on innocent tears, framing his stance as a moral rebellion against God's justice. In the parable of the Grand Inquisitor, Ivan argues that the Church corrected Christ's mistakes by embracing what he rejected, feeding people, offering certainty, and wielding power. By valuing freedom over happiness, God appears to sacrifice human welfare for an abstract principle, raising doubts about divine love. Dostoevsky offers no solution. Ivan's path leads to nihilistic despair, while his brother Alyosha chooses faith, responding to suffering with love and compassion. Ultimately, Dostoevsky suggests that innocent suffering cannot be solved philosophically but must be endured and met with love. Part 6: The Grand Inquisitor and the Choice Between Freedom and Security. The Grand Inquisitor chapter in The Brothers Karamazov is a profound political parable. Ivan tells Alyosha a story of Jesus returning to 16th century Spain, performing miracles, and being arrested by the Grand Inquisitor. In prison, the Inquisitor explains that Jesus erred by offering humanity freedom, a burden most people cannot bear. People desire security, certainty, and strong authority more than freedom. He interprets Satan's three temptations: bread, material security, miracle, certainty of faith, and power, social order, as the true needs of humanity. Jesus rejected them, but the Church embraced them, providing happiness for the majority at the cost of spiritual purity. The Inquisitor claims this compromise is an act of compassion for the weak. The parable reveals the psychological allure of totalitarianism. Solving economic problems, imposing absolute ideology, and providing strong leadership to relieve people of freedom's burden. It foreshadows fascism and communism. At the end, Jesus responds not with words but with a kiss, symbolizing love rather than argument. He leaves silently, while the Inquisitor continues his rule. The story highlights the enduring tension between freedom, with its risks and responsibilities, and security, with its comfort and dependence. This choice is unavoidable, and it shapes both individual lives and the fate of future generations. Part 7: Russian Orthodox Christianity versus Western religion. For Dostoevsky, the conflict between Christian traditions was not merely theological but a struggle for humanity's soul. He believed Western Christianity, both Catholicism and Protestantism, had betrayed Christ's original spirit by pursuing power, rationality, and social influence, losing its spiritual essence. Catholicism, seen as the heir of the Roman Empire, replacing love and humility with authority, law, and bureaucracy. The Grand Inquisitor symbolizes this betrayal, claiming to free humanity from the burden of spiritual freedom by imposing absolute authority, thereby destroying genuine faith and love. Protestantism, even worse, since it radicalized individualism and relativism, reducing religion to private opinion and paving the way for secularism and atheism. Socialism, for Dostoevsky, the final form of Western heresy. Combining Catholicism's pursuit of worldly power and Protestantism's individual freedom, but eliminating God entirely, replacing him with human reason and will. In contrast, Russian Orthodoxy embodied true Christianity, mystical, humble, communal, and centered on the sacred meaning of suffering. Through suffering, believers learn compassion, are purified of pride, and participate in Christ's redemptive passion. This connects to kenosis, Christ's self-emptying love, requiring surrender of self-will and total openness to divine grace. Characters like Alyosha Karamazov, Prince Mishkin, and Father Zosima embody this orthodox spirit, simple, compassionate, willing to suffer and forgive. Their goodness often appears foolish or ineffective by worldly standards, but their faith points to spiritual authenticity rather than worldly success. Thus, Dostoevsky envisioned Russia as having a messianic mission to save humanity from Western materialism and spiritual corruption. Yet this vision, while spiritually profound, was also dangerous, blending genuine religious insight with nationalist idealization that overlooked the real flaws of Russia and the Orthodox Church. Part 8. Love as the ultimate reality and redemptive force. In Dostoevsky's philosophy, love is not just an emotion or social bond but the fundamental force holding the universe together, identical with God. True love arises only through acceptance of suffering, sacrifice, and bearing others' pain. His Siberian prison experiences convinced him that beneath human cruelty lies a universal love capable of redeeming even the most degraded souls. He illustrates this paradox through characters: Prince Mishkin, pure but tragic love; Alyosha, mature, practical love, contrasted with figures like Raskolnikov or the underground man, who possess intellect but remain incapable of genuine love. Dostoevsky saw modern civilization's tragedy in spiritual isolation caused by rationalism, individualism, and materialism, which made true love nearly impossible. His alternative is sobornost, a spiritual communion through love, dissolving boundaries between self and other. Father Zosima embodies this ideal, teaching that all humanity shares in each person's sin and redemption. Yet true love is demanding. It requires sacrifice, courage, wisdom, and often brings suffering. It can be corrupted into possessiveness, sentimentality, or fanaticism. The ultimate test of love is forgiveness, even toward enemies and the seemingly evil, because only then can one transcend ego and share in the divine vision that sees all souls as equally precious. For Dostoevsky, this capacity for love and forgiveness marks the highest dignity of humanity and the final answer to life's meaning. Part 9, The Prophecy of Totalitarianism. In Demons, 1870s, Dostoevsky foresaw with striking accuracy the rise and nature of 20th-century totalitarianism. He argued that it did not stem from traditional authoritarianism but from the collapse of religious faith and traditional institutions. Unlike old tyrants who ruled by divine right or military power, modern totalitarian leaders presented themselves as servants of humanity, promising liberation and progress. Yet, philosophical ideas such as materialism, rationalism, and atheism provided the intellectual foundation for justifying control, repression, and violence. In the novel, Dostoevsky shows how revolutionaries, beginning with sincere concern for justice, gradually lose moral restraint, justifying lies, theft, and murder in the name of ideology. Educated youths, having lost religious faith but craving meaning, found in these movements a substitute religion offering mission, purpose, and salvation. He revealed how revolutionary logic inevitably turns into totalitarianism. To achieve absolute equality, freedom must be suppressed, the collective overrides individual will. Terror becomes not just a tool of power but a method of reshaping human consciousness, breaking resistance and producing compliant minds. Dostoevsky also highlighted the quasi-religious nature of totalitarian movements. They create rituals, sacred texts, martyrs, and demand absolute faith. Their greatest horror lies not only in oppression but in making people accept and even embrace their misery, destroying their capacity for independent thought and their very memory of goodness, signaling the ultimate triumph of evil. Part 10. The birth of existentialism and the divided self. Before existentialism became a formal philosophical movement, Dostoevsky had already dramatized its core insights through characters like the Underground Man, Raskolnikov, Ivan and Alyosha Karamazov, and Prince Myshkin. He explored themes such as the absurdity of existence, the burden of freedom, the anxiety of choice, the divided self, and the search for authentic selfhood in a meaningless universe. Unlike 20th-century secular existentialism, Dostoevsky's existentialism was rooted in profound spiritual struggle and the pursuit of transcendent meaning. His characters reveal that freedom is both a burden and an opportunity. It can lead to evasion and bad faith, but it also enables self-awareness, repentance, moral growth, and the possibility of choosing good. Dostoevsky emphasized the divided nature of human consciousness, where conflicting impulses and beliefs make authenticity both a challenge and a possibility. He also treated death as a central existential fact, both a source of anxiety and the urgency that gives choices weight. His influence shaped thinkers such as Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, Sartre, Camus, and Heidegger, though often indirectly. Yet he differed fundamentally by refusing to abandon religion. For Dostoevsky, existential despair was not the end point but a gateway to deeper faith. This religious dimension made his existential vision more hopeful and humane than much of the existentialist philosophy that followed. Part 11. The psychology of the unconscious and human motivation. Before Freud developed psychoanalysis, Dostoevsky had already mapped the unconscious mind with remarkable precision. His novels function as psychological case studies, exposing hidden drives, repressed desires, and unconscious conflicts that govern human behavior. Freud himself admitted that Dostoevsky anticipated many central discoveries of psychoanalytic theory. Unlike academic psychology, Dostoevsky's insights were grounded in direct observation of human nature under extreme conditions. He showed that people rarely act for the reasons they claim, but are driven by power needs, inadequacy, fear, or longing for connection. Characters like Raskolnikov, Ivan Karamazov, and the Underground Man reveal the split between conscious explanations and unconscious motivations. Dostoevsky analyzed defense mechanisms, rationalization, denial, projection, compensation, sublimation, long before psychology formally did. Yet, knowing one's defenses does not free one from them, and excessive self-analysis can itself become pathological. He also anticipated the link between childhood trauma and adult behavior, while maintaining that moral responsibility and spiritual transformation remain possible. Another major insight concerns guilt and conscience. They can inspire redemption but also become pathological, leading to paralysis and self-destruction. Love, sexuality, and the pursuit of power in his works are likewise shaped by unconscious needs and conflicts. He further recognized the paradoxical role of suffering. It can give meaning, foster empathy, act as self-punishment, and serve as a catalyst for spiritual growth. Dostoevsky's novels are not just theoretical but therapeutic. They allow readers to recognize their own conflicts, accept repressed aspects of themselves, and find hope for transformation. This healing dimension explains why his work still holds such profound power over readers more than a century later. Part 12, The Rejection of Western Civilization and the Return to Soil. Dostoevsky believed that Western civilization was leading humanity toward spiritual catastrophe by pursuing rationalism, materialism, and individual autonomy at the expense of spiritual depth, community, and transcendence. He criticized Western Christianity as corrupted by politics and rational theology, producing societies that were materially prosperous yet spiritually empty. The fundamental error, in his view, was the belief that human reason alone could solve all problems without divine guidance. As an alternative, Dostoevsky proposed a return to the soil, meaning a revival of Orthodox Christianity, traditional values, and the spiritual life preserved by the Russian peasantry: humility, suffering love, and communal unity. His Siberian prison experience convinced him that peasants embodied a unique spiritual wisdom capable of saving not only Russia but the world from modernity's crisis. He envisioned Russia resisting Western imitation and instead developing along its own spiritual principles, becoming a beacon of hope for humanity. Yet he acknowledged that Russian elites were deeply westernized, so true renewal would require a radical transformation of education, culture, economy, and society based on orthodox and communal ideals. For Dostoevsky, this mission was not just cultural but cosmic. If Russia failed, humanity would sink into spiritual death. However, while inspiring cultural identity and hope, this vision also risked fostering nationalist arrogance, religious exclusivism, and cultural imperialism. Part 13. The Eternal Struggle. At the core of Dostoevsky's philosophy lies the eternal struggle between faith and doubt, together with his revolutionary insight that suffering is the essential condition through which humans attain spiritual growth and authentic meaning. Suffering, for him, is not merely an accident to eliminate but a crucible that can either destroy or redeem depending on how it is embraced. Through characters such as Ivan Karamazov, rebellion and atheism, Alyosha, trust and compassion, Sonia and Father Zosima, active love and moral responsibility, Dostoevsky illustrates that redemption comes through active love, the willingness to bear not only one's own pain but also the suffering of others. Those who reject suffering fall into bitterness, rebellion, or destruction. From his own prison experience, Dostoevsky developed a prophetic vision of humanity's future. The decline of religious faith would lead to nihilism and moral relativism, paving the way for totalitarian ideologies. He foresaw how revolutionary ideals could become tools of mass oppression. He was also ahead of his time in psychology, analyzing excessive self-consciousness, childhood trauma, alienation, and spiritual emptiness as roots of modern crises. True healing, he argued, requires spiritual transformation rather than technical fixes. Dostoevsky's legacy is both pessimistic, about humanity's capacity for evil, and hopeful, about our potential for redemption through love. For him, faith is not the absence of doubt but the existential choice to trust ultimate meaning despite contrary evidence. His vision offers no easy answers but reveals that, life's meaning is found in transforming suffering into love, freedom means bearing responsibility, and authentic humanity emerges when we live with courage, honesty, and compassion.